what he's doing now. He's blaming everything on China. He's blaming everything on the Chinese. He's blaming everything, and people don't make a distinction, as you well know, from a South Korean and someone from Beijing. They make no distinction. It's Asia, and that's the way he's just using it as a wedge.
Look, no one should doubt that the Chinese are doing inappropriate things, whether it's taking intellectual property, certain types of espionage, potentially using students, getting access to laboratories. You mentioned 1979. Deng Xiaoping's China and Xi Jinping's China are more than 50 years away. This is a very different China. The question, though, is how to respond, and we could have responded with a scalpel. Instead, we responded with a sledgehammer. We could have had certain diplomats forced to leave. We could have students leave. We could deny certain kinds of students access to certain laboratories. Instead, we did this big, let's close the consulate. This is a page out of the Cold War playbook. China will respond in kind at a minimum. We have 6 consulates in China. We're far more dependent on our consulates there to gain windows into China or China's neighbors like North Korea or like Tibet or what's going on in Hong Kong. So my concern is China will respond, and the net is one. We are worse off. China has many more ways to get into the United States. We're much more open. And second of all, this continues to spiral down of the world's most important bilateral relationship. So, pardon me for saying the obvious, but this looks a lot more about politics here than it does about foreign policy. We ought to be working with China still to deal with North Korea's nuclear and missile challenge, with climate. We have real trade issues. So this, to me, is not diplomacy. This is politics.
Welcome to episode 295, War Room Pandemic, Thursday, July the 23rd, the year of our Lord 2020. You heard both there from Joe Biden and from his good friend Richard Haas there speaking about what President Trump is doing, he says, is not about diplomacy, but is about politics. We're on America's Voice.News, John Fredericks Radio Network, Newsmax TV, and blown through the CCP's firewalls. On G News and GTV, we have our regular guest, Jack Posobiec, One American News, joining us in this hour, and also probably one of the most comprehensive resumes I've ever seen in my life. Eric Greitens, a former Missouri governor, former Navy SEAL, one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. Eric joins us in studio for the shows today, so we're grateful to have you all on board. Jack, Maxie, and the team here in the War Room, and Stephen K. Bannon joining us down the line. Steve.
It's an all-Navy day. You've got Naval Intelligence represented by Posobiec. Eric Greitens is Governor Greitens, Navy SEAL. I'm a service warfare officer, and of course Jack Maxey's Old Navy tar. So we're really proud to have the Navy well represented today. Look, you heard the voice of appeasement in Richard Haas, right? What the President of the United States has is a fully comprehensive plan to contain and confront the Chinese Communist Party. The collaborators and the voice of appeasement is Richard Haas. You heard him on Morning Joe this morning. That's the conventional wisdom. In this outrageous assertion that Joe Biden's making about the President of the United States being racist when he's talking about China, Joe Biden is kowtowed to the Chinese Communist Party. His family's in business with the Chinese Communist Party. He says his best relationship in the world is with Xi. He spent many hours with him. Joe Biden essentially screwed up the negotiations on both the cyber intrusions and militarization of the South China Sea. One of the reasons the Chinese people are enslaved is because of Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's making this racist thing that, you can't tell Koreans apart from Chinese. It just shows you how inappropriate his language is and inappropriate his thinking is. And to try to throw this to the President of the United States, and the President's having a fully comprehensive takedown of the Chinese Communist Party's intrusion throughout the rest of the world. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party is the guys that caused this pandemic. And I think every American should be proud that the President of the United States is now with his entire team, FBI, State Department, Defense Department, in the National Security Advisor. All we need is the Treasury Department. The President of the United States has got to make Mnuchin and Kudlow wake up, get on the ball, start doing sanctions, start sanctioning individuals, sanctioning financial institutions, break the Hong Kong dollar off from the U.S. dollar, play hardball with these guys. the buried lead in the story this morning, the Wall Street Journal. 25 different PLA members and CCP members are under investigations throughout the nation. 25 different locations that the FBI is looking at right now. So, Richard Haas is absolutely the voice of appeasement. This is what you're going to hear nonstop. This politics is not politics. They're engaged in a hot information and economic war with the United States. And the reason we've been losing for 20 years is because of collaborators like Richard Haas who have collaborated and taken money from the Chinese Communist Party. Raheem, you had a great article up today, but I also want to hear, we've got a couple of veterans in Posobiec and Greitens. I want you guys to jump in here. But Raheem, I think with all the other stuff we have to go through, Rubio saying that Houston was the center of espionage, all of it, I want to get to your brilliant story in the National Pulse that talks about they're actually using the virus. They think it could take down all these populist governments, which they hate because they understand populist governments are nationalist governments on the economics and will sit there and fight the CCP the whole time.
Yeah, well, this is it was an incredible video that was released by the Chinese global television network CGTN. The audience will be more than familiar with CGTN by this point, but really the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda outfit that pushes English language fake news into the English-speaking world. This was a YouTube video released just a couple of days ago. Has got some traction. The Chinese media is effectively making the claim that the coronavirus is a tool to beat populists. They name by name Jair Bolsonaro, Boris Johnson, and of course President Trump in this as well. I wonder if we have that clip that we can play for the audience right here.
Tackling an epidemic on such a large scale requires cooperation, solidarity, and responsibility. Everything that populist leaders stand against. They try to build more walls between countries. But viruses transcend borders, races, and ethnicities. COVID-19 might be another straw on the camel's back to expose their hollow politics. They thrive on imagined threats, but cannot solve real ones.
Steve, I want to throw it back to you at that point. I don't know if you can hear that as well as we do, but I want to get your thoughts on that.
It's absolutely, Raheem, a great reporting. It's absolutely stunning. I'd like to hear the governors in Posobiec, but it's stunning to me. They're this blatant. Ladies and gentlemen, this virus, if it didn't come out of a biolab, if it didn't come out of Wuhan, and Mike Pompeo's doubling down again says they have intelligence that ties it back to Wuhan. I'm sure he's going to talk about it in his speech today. Even if it didn't come, we know the chain of title of decisions they made. They lied to the World Health Organization or collaborated with them to withhold information. They lied to everyone. They lied to the United States. They flew over here in January, signed the trade deal when they knew that they had human-to-human transmission as early as late December of 2019. And now they're bragging about it. Now they're bragging about the fact that they can use that, populists and nationalists build walls. Populists and nationalists worry about their own countries. The number one thing the Chinese Communist Party wants to take down is economic nationalists and populists throughout the world because they understand they're focused on breaking the business model of the party of Davos. That business model is predicated upon slave labor from China and everybody else like a Russian serf. Slave labor from China. And that's why Nike and Apple and all these companies are in business with them because they want the slave labor in China. They want the cheaper labor. And CGTN, which is just a branch of CCTV and a propaganda arm, and the people in the UK that work for them, Raheem, should be. I'm disgusted that you're seeing top flight former journalists work over there because it's a pure propaganda arm. But now I think it's been exposed through these broadcasts they're having.
Yeah, that's right. I want to get Eric Greitens on this. Eric, when you look at that, I mean, you saw the video there. I'm sure you've seen the story also. Give me your first impressions of this. And here's the thing. Is it enough to have these, because they are registered as foreign agents in this country, or should we be looking at more stringent measures to stop what is effectively a foreign propaganda attempt right before a U.S. presidential election?
Well, first of all, I mean, let's step back and look strategically, right? And what people have seen again and again is you've seen the foreign policy establishment come out and sound all of these alarm bells every time President Trump takes strong action. Okay, we had for decades presidents in both parties saying that they were going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And when Trump said that he was really going to do it, you saw folks like Richard Haas. You saw the whole foreign policy establishment stand up saying, well, you can't really fight for America. You can't really do what you promised to do. You can't really be bold. You can't really be courageous. You can't really take strong action. And then President Trump did it. And all of their predictions about doomsday and war in the Middle East, and he's bringing on World War III.
Yeah, where was this intifada we were promised?
That's right. None of it came to pass because President Trump took strong action. And what you're seeing here is that same kind of alarmism when President Trump moves to confront the Chinese Communist Party, which is engaged in espionage in the United States of America. And it's absolutely critical that that we get behind the president when he is taking the war to the Chinese Communist Party. And look, you've seen, and I think that the other question that's not being asked by the mainstream media of Joe Biden is, what's your plan? What's your plan for confronting the Chinese? What's your plan for dealing with their theft of intellectual property? What's your plan for dealing with espionage? These are all real questions, and of course the mainstream media isn't asking those questions of Joe Biden. All they're doing is attacking the president. You know, I can tell you my just brief story. First foreign country I ever went to was China. I went there in 1993 when I was 19 years old. There was actually a program at my university where if you'd never been overseas before, you could go overseas. And so I went over, and this was just 4 years after Tiananmen Square. Long story short, I ended up teaching English in a Chinese-owned company. And they had invited me to come in and teach English. Well, I had no idea how to teach English. I was 19 years old, and I had all of these students walking in, and some of them had, exceptional English language abilities. Others could barely say hello. So I had no idea what to do. So I just said, well, hey, why don't we have some free discussion? And the questions that came to me, the first question was they wanted to know about the American Constitution. And they wanted to know about freedom of speech. They wanted to know about freedom of assembly. And I thought, how exciting. This is great. We're having all these fantastic conversations. And I was talking about the Constitution and freedom of speech because these young men and women at the time, they were about 27 years old. They had all been at Tiananmen Square 4 years earlier as college students, and they'd never talked with someone outside of the country about what people thought about Tiananmen. Well, a couple days later, it's a Friday night, I'm playing darts in a dorm room, and a couple of Chinese police officers knock at the door, and they say, "Hey, you need to come with us," and so does your friend. And I said, hey man, it's Friday night. It's like 9 o'clock. I don't need to go anywhere with you. If something needs to happen, I'll come tomorrow morning. And so they this kind of gets translated around, and it gets translated back to me, and they say, Mr. Erica, you are going to the police station now. And I went down there, and they questioned me for 2 hours about who was asking questions, who was asking about freedom of speech, who was asking about the Constitution. There is a real yearning, and there's a real issue, which I obviously experienced when I was 19 years old, and it's got to be dealt with.
We're going to have to hold on that. Steve, we've got to go to a quick break here. Jack Posobiec, Steve Bannon, Jack Maxey, Eric Greitens, Raheem Kassam, a packed out war room here today. Hashtag war room pandemic for you guys to have your say on the show. We're monitoring the live streams as always. Make sure you're heading over to pandemic.warroom.org to get the latest shows, the latest show notes. Everything that comes out of this show, we provide you links, specificity, and action. War Room Pandemic returns in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, 2020's been a gut punch to American business, and if you're going to succeed, you need every possible advantage. Smart companies are run on NetSuite by Oracle, one of the sponsors of this show, the world's #1 cloud business system. Get your free guide right now at netsuite.com/Bannon, netsuite.com/Bannon. You're back in the war room. Jack Maxey, Eric Greitens joining us on the line. Jack Posobiec, Stephen K. Bannon, and I'm Raheem Kassam. Jack Maxey, kick us off.
Well, there's some interesting comments that were made by a fellow named Wang Wenbin, who's the foreign ministry spokesperson for Communist China. and talking about some of these internal cables that were referenced by Pompeo, claiming that we knew that it came out of the Wuhan lab, or that perhaps there was some evidence that it did. He responded, the laboratory has high standards of biosafety and a strict management system. All the researchers must undergo systematic theoretical operational training. And then he says, a large amount of their evidence, of their so-called supported so-called truth, shows that they have no morals at all. Quote, the contents disclosed by the relevant reports have enabled the world to see once again how little truth is in the so-called evidence and the truth of the United States. Speaking of the truth, we do hope the U.S. government will tell the truth about the issues such as the Fort Detrick biolab and give an explanation to the American people and the international community. Speaking of Pompeo, he said his remarks were full of lies, exposing the serious strategic misjudgment of the United States in its China policy and full of McCarthyist bigotry. China's efforts and achievements in the international fight against the pandemic are recognized by the whole world. Now, if that isn't a load of malarkey, fans, I don't know what is.
They're recognized. They're recognized by the whole world of the damage and carnage they did. Remember, Southampton University in the United Kingdom said if they had been truthful in the last week of December of 19 or the first week of January 20, 95% of the economic carnage, 95% of the deaths would not have happened. Here's what we need to do is stop playing games. The President of the United States today should say you got 72 hours. We're tired of the happy talk. We're tired of the spin. Americans, 1,000 Americans a day are dying. People throughout the world are dying. It's pretty evident what went on here. And we don't need some spokesman from the foreign ministry starting to lecture the American people and lecture us when our economy's been destroyed, our cultural life's been destroyed, and over 140,000 Americans are dead because of the Chinese Communist Party. It's time for the President of the United States that you got 72 hours. Within 72 hours, if you have not opened up every one of your labs and proven to us what your spokesman just said, that you were properly managed and at the highest level of professionalism, and led in an international consortium led by Japan, India, Hong Kong, the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Africa, Latin America, the top biologists and epidemiologists in the world to go to those labs to interrogate and interview these lab technicians and doctors, review every experiment, every animal they got there, every species, every gain of function experiment they were doing. If they don't do that in 72 hours, we ought to cut them off from the U.S. dollar, sanction the 5 largest financial institutions, starting with Hong Kong Shanghai Bank and the Bank of China, and personally sanction economically Yuan Shishan, President Xi, and all their henchmen, and start with seizing the hundreds of billions of dollars they've laundered out of China, stolen from the Chinese people, and put in their own account for real estate in Midtown Manhattan, in the West End of London, in Belgravia. And guess what? If they need to, we can go around with a driver and point out exactly what they own. This is outrageous, and the time for playing games with these people has stopped. Yes, we should be rolling up all these consulates. We should be going, as Posobiec is going to talk about, all the intelligence operations they have here in the United States. It's time for that to stop. But the central beating heart of this issue of the lab in Wuhan, exactly what they knew and when did they know it, and actually what they did there. And nothing they can say can ever appease the world of what they did. And for people like Richard Haas, collaborators and appeasers that got us in this situation over the last 30 years, it's time to keep your mouth shut. We don't care what you have to say anymore. Your spin doesn't work anymore. This is a full-on, they're an economic and information war with the United States. You even have guys like Mark Warner, Senator Mark Warner, now getting off the dime and moving forward. This is a bipartisan issue. This is the American people. Pelosi didn't bring this. Schumer didn't bring this. McCarthy didn't bring this. President Trump didn't bring it. Joe Biden didn't do it. It's the Chinese Communist Party, and they have to be held accountable. Now, guys, I'll get off my soapbox for a second. We ought to hear from Posobiec and break some news here.
Yeah, look, I mean, Jack's put a suit on for us today, so I feel like the least we can do is throw it over to Jack. Jack, you've heard a lot in this first segment, and from Steve there. I want to get your thoughts on that, and specifically regarding these embassies and regarding what's going on at these embassies. Jack Posobiec.
Well, Raheem and Steve, thank you so much. I'd also like to say thank you to the governor for joining us. It's an honor to be on with him, a man as distinguished as he is. You know, this is something where, yes, we saw buried the lead in the Wall Street Journal today, the fact that 25 cities now have active investigations of the FBI, not just going after Chinese spy rings, which is something that I've talked about and railed against for months and years at this point, but actual PLA, People's Liberation Army, undeclared members. We've seen the Chinese spy rings in our research universities, in academia, the 1,000 Talents Plan that reported on again and again. We're now seeing the Chinese hacking, the espionage operations that are being directed towards our research. We've also seen the Chinese interference operations and cyber warfare they've used against the United States Navy, not only to steal Navy secrets, but also in some cases to interfere with U.S. Navy vessels and navigation. But let's also go back. We don't need to talk about everything that China's done over all the years. We can talk about what China was doing just a couple weeks ago, the operations they were running out of these embassies, because we remember the hoarding of the PPE that went on over a 6-week period. Go back to January and February of 2020, just this year, a couple of weeks ago, a story that we broke, a story that we talked about relentlessly at that time, 2.02 billion safety masks, those N95 masks that are such a topic of conversation right now. The president's been asking people, wear them if you feel you need them, be patriotic. The clandestine United Front Work Department. This is a department of the CCP that Xi Jinping, Chairman Xi, has given an excess of funding to. He's given so much extra funding to this organization. They're the overseas influence network of the CCP. And this isn't just in the United States or North America, by the way. We're talking Vancouver, Toronto, New York, Melbourne, Tokyo, these embassies and consulates. This is where they were urging the overseas Chinese to bulk buy N95 masks in order to ship, in their words, ship back batches of scarce supplies for the motherland. This hoarding was done so that then they knew that the Americans and everybody else, the North Americans, from the Canadians, of course, the Europeans, the Japanese, the Australians, would all have to come to them because we don't have the manufacturing capabilities anymore. This isn't just a financial situation. The appeasers and the collaborators that we've talked about, the CCP understands this isn't just financial. They can use it for political leverage, and they did it just a couple of weeks ago, and they used these consulates to do so.
Do we still have Steve? Steve, are you still with us?
Yeah. Talk about for a second what Marco Rubio. I want you to comment, and I'll let Governor Greitens and Raheem to jump in here. What Rubio tweeted out yesterday, the reason that Houston was shut down, it was a center of an active espionage capability and apparatus set up by the CCP here in the United States. Jack, what are your thoughts on that and Governor Greitens?
Well, that tells me, obviously, I don't have access to our counter-espionage operation that we're running on Houston, but what it tells me is that they were possibly pursuing an active operation, and there may have been imminent collection that would be going on in Houston. That's why they identified it as a critical node that had to be shut down immediately. This obviously is a very drastic measure. In the spy-on-spy world, you don't always see consulates being shut down like this. You don't always see, it's more a little bit more diplomatic. I see you, you see me, I'm watching you as you watch me kind of stuff. This shutdown shows me that there was an imminent threat of collection, espionage that was coming out of Houston. That's what Rubio is talking about. That's why Pompeo and the United States State Department shut it down.
Governor.
Yeah,
look, we know they. Go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say, we obviously haven't seen the intelligence about the counter-espionage work that was being done, but as all of your listeners will know, when you have places like these consulates, they are often used as centers for spies, for espionage, and then the United States government will conduct counter-espionage activities in order to track them. They must have had some very good intel about what was happening specifically in Houston, and no doubt by doing this, they were intending to send a very specific message about what they were seeing, what they knew was happening, and it sounds like would have been a real blow to the espionage efforts that the Communist Party was undertaking.
Steve, we've got about 90 seconds here.
Yeah, one thing we know is that we know they've been trying to hack into, and it could possibly be Anderson down there, but they've had a massive hacking program to try to hack in and steal information about a potential vaccine. Remember, what the CCP wants is to come up with the first vaccine, no matter how squared away it is, to be able to have the world go and kowtow to them for their great scientific capabilities. So not only were you saw the consulate there burning documents in the barrels outside, just like what happened before Pearl Harbor, but there's all this huge concept going around. People are talking about this massive hacking apparatus and how this hacking apparatus is tied into these consulates. So want to make sure we get everybody on hashtag War and Pandemic, the live stream. In the next segments, Raheem, what I want to turn to, since we got the governor there, I want to talk about Chicago. I want to talk about the president's authority to do this, the bloodshed that's happening, and then come back with Posobiec. Also Portland. We have two cities that are out of control, one with absolute violence in the streets and the other one with anarchy in the streets. I think this has to be addressed. I think President Trump's done the right thing, but there's a lot of questions today. Does he have the authority? Does he have the backup to actually do it?
And we've got to hear from what the Democrats are saying about this, because some are now coming around to the view that we have had in the war room for quite some time about the danger of the CCP. We'll get to all of that and more after this short break. Jack Maxey, Eric Greitens, Jack Posobiec, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, this show is all about action, 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 and so should your lives be right now. On the back of this pandemic, you need to take so many actions to keep your head afloat. And one of those is NetSuite by Oracle, one of the sponsors of this show, the world's #1 cloud business system. Smart companies run on NetSuite because it gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Whether you're doing hundreds of millions in sales or $1 million in sales, NetSuite lets you manage every penny with precision. You can compete with anyone from anywhere, right from your phone. So join over 20,000 companies that run on NetSuite. They've surveyed hundreds of business leaders and assembled a playbook of the top strategies they're using as America reopens for business. So get your free guide, 7 actions businesses need to take now, and schedule your free product tour at netsuite.com/Bannon. That's netsuite.com/Bannon. You're back in the war room. Packed war room today. Governor Eric Greitens joins us in studio. Jack Posobiec down the line. Jack Maxey here in studio. Stephen K. Bannon down the line. And of course, yours truly, Raheem Kassam. I want to bring in another guest of sorts now, although not live on the show. But this range of clips that we have from Mark Warner, Democrat Mark Warner, is absolutely extraordinary. And I just thought, given the last 2 segments about the CCP and all this, we've got to show you guys how this isn't just a single party issue. This isn't just confined to the lunatics down here in the war room or to President Trump and his team. This is bigger and beyond that. You saw that yesterday, what we talked about with Mike Pompeo going across and solidifying, putting into place this alliance of liberty around the world and gathering together people from all around the world to see down the CCP here. It's also happening in terms of crossing party lines. So let's hear from a Democrat on this. Let's roll these tapes.
But I can tell you, for the last 2 years, I and other members of the Intel Committee have been holding classified briefings with business leaders and academic leaders about the concerted efforts of the Chinese Communist Party to steal our intellectual property, to steal it from companies, to steal it from universities, to be on better guard and greater guard. The fact that many of the Chinese tech companies are in effect arms of the Chinese state. And I think, without getting into the specifics, I think the FBI action is appropriate. And I think companies need to acknowledge that doing business with a lot of these Chinese firms, do it at your own risk. And the idea that they're going to sacrifice our values and principles to try to get access to the Chinese market is going to come back and bite them. Let me be clear. My concern is not with China, not with Chinese, obviously not. And one of the things that this president always mistakes is, making inappropriate comments about Chinese Americans. My problem is with the Communist Party of China, President Xi Jinping, and their effort to turn their business entities into agents of the state, their ability to create a surveillance state with technology, that what they've done to the Uyghurs in China, what they're trying to do now to the people of Hong Kong, and the fact that they have they use students as agents. They use companies as agents. And I know there will be some reaction from China, but this is in our national security interest, and more American businesses and universities need to acknowledge, recognize, and guard against this problem.
Senator, is there anything TikTok could do to make you feel better about having that app on the phones of American citizens?
Chuck, my daughters are a little bit older than I think your kids, but I wouldn't want TikTok on my any of my devices. Mm-hmm. And there is, TikTok is a component of ByteDance. There is some efforts from some of the American investors to try to separate the enterprises. I'm open to see how they want to do that separation, but if the basic intellectual capital and the basic programming is still potentially at the whim of Communist Party functionaries in China, I would be pretty nervous about what you do.
Now, Mark Warner is no low-level Democrat. Mark Warner he was the keynote address at the 2008 Democrat conference. He's a senator. He's been the governor of Virginia. He's been the vice chair of the Senate Democrat Caucus, the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. This is a senior member of the Democratic Party, and I get it. He has to throw meat to MSNBC. Oh, the president's insulted Chinese Americans. The president's never done that, but he's on MSNBC. He has to throw that out there. Listen to the signal that's coming out of Mark Warner there. The signal is the CCP and all of its apparatus. I want to bring in Jack Posobiec and also Governor Greitens. Governor Greitens, what your reaction to what Senator Warner said there?
Well, first of all, it's a good thing, right? So one of the things that held the country together during the Cold War is that you had Republicans and Democrats, a lot of whom were veterans of World War II, who were willing to put the country first. And yeah, there was always going to be internal divisions, but we should be able to agree. There should be, we'd hope, a sensible wing of the Democratic Party which would recognize that the Chinese Communist Party actually represents a threat. And it's good to see a senior member of the Democratic Party coming out and saying this and being able to get on the same page.
Jack Posobiec and then Steve Bannon and then Jack Maxey.
Yeah, I just throw out that there were a lot of Democrats, senior-level Democrats, who actually used to be quite good on China. Nancy Pelosi used to be someone who would go over there, who would talk about the victims of Tiananmen, who would talk about the human rights record. She would talk about Tibet, endlessly speak about Tibet. Hillary Clinton, when she was First Lady, famously went over there and talked about human rights and women's rights in China. So this used to be something that we, as a country, as the foremost leader of the free world, didn't used to treat as some kind of partisan issue. And I do think that you see Senator Warner kind of hearkening back to that past. He remembers that America is supposed to stand up for freedom and that we shouldn't have a Chinese spyware app downloaded on the phones of all our teenagers and children. And so that's coming through now.
Steve?
Yeah, Raheem, I want to go back to the very opening clip about Richard Haas. Richard Haas said, oh, this is going back to this blunt instrument type of reaction by the Reagan administration or by the Trump administration harkens back to the Cold War. He's absolutely correct. We won the Cold War. And the reason was President Reagan brought together a war plan and it had Democrats in there. Remember, yesterday, Raheem, you talked about Pompeo being in London. Where is he speaking? The Henry Jackson Society. You've been a major fellow there. We've had guys on from the Henry Jackson Society. It's named after Scoop Jackson, who was a Cold War Democrat. This is a good thing. What Mark Warner said on Meet the Press is as tough as any Republicans has come out and talked, and I think it's a good thing. What I think the president and the administration have to pick up on, though, the buried lead, as he said, repeating war room pandemic, this is not about Chinese Americans. It is not about the Chinese people. The Chinese people are the biggest victims of the villain here is the Chinese Communist Party. We have to get the language precise. You can see what Biden, these guys are doing to him right now. Biden's the racist because Biden has supported the Chinese Communist Party in their suppression and oppression of the Chinese people. The Chinese people are among the most decent, hardworking people on earth. If I could tell you every day the feedback we get coming through the firewall, people in China say, thank you so much for someone speaking up for us. You've got the whistleblower movement. You got Miles Grow. You got GTV. They blow it through there on Mandarin language. And the feedback we get from Lao Beijing, old 100 names, the deplorables of China, who are sitting there and say, no one's ever spoken for us. Well, that day has changed. And that's why I think the administration has to start specifically focusing on the Chinese Communist Party. Now, we're hearing that from the FBI director. We're hearing it from Mike Pompeo. We're hearing certainly from Bill Barr in that magnificent speech he gave the other day. We need to start hearing this from the Treasury Department. And once again, before I toss it back to you guys, we got to give them 72 hours to turn over everything. 72 hours, or we put together an international consortium and go in and do this. This pandemic's never going to be sorted until we get this information. It's an outrage, and I think you'd have a lot of Democrats join us, because I think there's a lot more Mark Warners in the Democratic Party than there are appeasers like the Morning Joe crowd and Richard Haas.
Steve, it's Jack. One of the things that struck me about what he said, obviously we support the Chinese people, we always have, and we oppose the CCP. But he said something to the effect that universities or higher education better start readjusting. We have 300,000 mainland Chinese students in our university system, an extra 50,000 from Hong Kong. And this is roughly about $25 billion in tuition going to our higher education schools, and all of these students pay full freight. So there is a desire to increase their numbers, but I remember the Cold War well, and blunt instruments did not include allowing 300,000 Soviet students to infect every one of our campuses.
Right. Steve?
Look, we want to, the one things we want to do, we want to make sure that the Chinese people are being used by the Chinese Communist Party. They were used inadvertently to spread the virus, when the Chinese Communist Party knew that the Hubei and Wuhan and other areas of China were very effective. They use these Chinese students. Look, there's nothing better. As you can see in Hong Kong, the student revolt there has just been fantastic to stand up for freedom and democracy. But unfortunately, the reality is the Chinese students that come over here to have the full freight paid by the government essentially have to agree to be assets to be able to report everything. That's why the cultural institutions of the Confucius Institute and all these have to be looked at. This is what Warner's talking about. Also, their infiltration into higher academia by funding research and funding these professors who are not fully open about where they're getting the money from. This is the Chinese Communist Party's infiltration methods, and they're using innocent people. That's the thing. They're using innocent people when they spread the disease. They're using innocent people, innocent students on this to gather as much information as possible. Yeah. They're purely and totally evil. They will use anything, and they'll particularly use the Chinese people to further their goals.
We opened with a clip from Joe Biden as well. There's another one that I want to get to here, just in the closing of this. We're not gonna be able to. I don't know if we're gonna be able to pivot topics in time. We've about 2 minutes left in this segment, Steve. But I want to play this Joe Biden clip.
We'll handle Chicago and Portland in the next segments.
Yeah, and I want to get to this Joe Biden clip and get your team's reaction on it. Let's roll it.
And what President Trump has done in going his spreading of racism, the way he deals with people based on the color of their skin, their national origin, where they're from, is absolutely sickening. No sitting president has ever done this. Never, never, never. No Republican president has done this. No Democratic president. We have racists, and they've existed. They've tried to get elected president. He's the first one that has. And the way he pits people against one another is all designed to divide the country, divide people, not put them together.
Steve, you made mention there that Joe Biden has picked the Chinese Communist Party over the people of China. How can he get up there and say what he says about President Trump?
Because it's total chutzpah. He doesn't want to admit, and quite frankly, we've got to continue to press this. He doesn't want to admit his relationship to the Chinese Communist Party. He wants to talk about his family's relationship, his financial relationship, and particularly the fact that Obama depended upon him on the pivot to Asia, and he failed miserably. The reason the nation's in this jam is because of the failed leadership of Joe Biden on the one responsibility he had in 8 years in the Obama administration was to head up the pivot to Asia. And on that, it was a catastrophic failure. He failed on negotiating cyber intrusions, intellectual property theft, and particularly militarization of the South China Sea. Look, as the surface warfare officer here among our naval personnel today on the show, from the SEALs to the intel officers, I can tell you, in the South China Sea, if there's ever a kinetic war, if we don't take care of this on the information war and the economic war, if we ever slide to a kinetic war, it's going to be started in the South China Sea. And it's because Joe Biden failed in his mission, his mandate from President Obama to demilitarize the South China Sea. He got rolled by sheep. Him to sit there and say racism is outrageous.
It is outrageous. Jake and Sarah text me reminding me that President Trump gave the largest crowd in India. Some racist. War Room Pandemic returns. Jack Maxey, Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Posobiec, Eric Greitens, and Osaka.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. Jack Maxey, Governor Eric Greitens, Jack Posobiec, Stephen K. Bannon, Raheem Kassam here. Thursday, July 23rd, the year of our Lord 2020. I want to go to somebody who's been very, very busy as of late. Is the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, in doing a magnificent job in the United Kingdom, really twisting the arm of the feckless British political establishment who has tried to stand on the sidelines throughout this fight with the Chinese Communist Party for way too long. Really, even at the outset of the pandemic, you saw how they were trying to sort of stand just in the middle of the road or on the sidelines, not really take any sides, just try and play that out, taking the PPP from China, not wanting to talk about the Chinese virus, but Secretary of State, between the Secretary of State and the President of the United States, really twisting the arm, first on Huawei, and now what we're looking at, what we have called in this studio, the Alliance of Liberty. Let's talk about Mike Pompeo, and let's hear from Mike Pompeo in the UK yesterday. Let's roll a clip.
I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the British government for its principled responses to these challenges. You made a sovereign decision to ban Huawei from future 5G networks. You've joined other free nations to condemn China's broken promises on the Sino-British Treaty. You generously opened your doors to Hong Kongers who seek nothing more than fleeing just for some freedom. And yesterday you suspended your extradition treaty and extended your arms embargo on China to Hong Kong itself. We support those sovereign choices. We think well done. We want every nation to work against that kind of activity. It's those actions. It's not about language. It's not about words. It's about we want every nation to work together to push back against the Chinese Communist Party's efforts in every dimension that I described to you today. That it certainly includes the United Kingdom, includes every country. We hope we can build out a coalition that understands this threat and will work collectively to convince the Chinese Communist Party it's not in their best interest to engage in this kind of behavior.
I didn't try and match Pompeo's outfit, but somehow I've basically managed to from that clip. Pretty classy. Secretary Pompeo, Steve, want to bring you in on this. Pretty classy, giving them the credit. But we all know it took some arm twisting to get there, right?
Well, listen, it did, but look where they've come in the last year, and I think now they're falling into what Dave Ramaswamy referred to as the Alliance of Liberty. It couldn't be better. And I think it was very, also, yesterday, speaking at the Henry Jackson, you know how important that society's been in the United Kingdom, Raheem, as really talking about. Jackson was a guy, a Democrat, that was a huge Cold Warrior and one of the integral parts of taking down the Soviet Union. So I thought it was fantastic. One other thing, Mike Pompeo, remember Bloomberg had this story yesterday, we've got it up on the site, that Pompeo also says he's got incontrovertible evidence that the CCP totally runs the World Health Organization and that we're 100% correct in pulling out of this thing until it's totally restructured and get the CCP's elements out. Look, we've talked a lot about a really a war plan coming together as sophisticated as President Reagan's in the early 1980s to really take down the evil empire, to take down the Soviet Union. And people laughed and dismissed President Reagan when he said, hey, how about this? We win, they lose. Remember, he was fighting the Kissinger kind of Thucydides trap mentality back in the 70s. When everybody said the Soviet Union was ascendant, their command economy was the way to go. They had a stronger military. It turned out it was all nonsense. When Reagan first got there, he had a complete analysis of their economy done and found out that Democratic administrations and even President Nixon had been wrong. The economy of the Soviet Union was only half the size that people thought. And that's through economic war and really using our technology and our economy through Star Wars, the defense budget, all of it. Pressure to the Saudis to drop the price of oil and keep pumping is really what crushed the Soviet Union. You've seen the same sophistication here, whether it's the National Security Advisor O'Brien in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago, FBI Director Wray, who laid out the roll-up he's going to do of the CCP agents here in the United States. Bill Barr's magnificent speech Thursday that took the whole element of what we've been talking on war room pandemic for months and months and months and laid it out. And today, a historic speech this afternoon out in Yorba Linda, California, at the Nixon Library, where President Nixon was born, this magnificent library out there. And Pompeo is out there with Miles Yu and other members of the State Department. He's going to give I think the capstone speech of what's happened over the last 4 weeks to go through the administration's essential war plan to confront and contain the Chinese Communist Party. So it's a very historic day. If you think of ways that things are moving, and you see, and some Democrats are definitely aligned with us, Joe Biden's wandering around. He doesn't want to talk. All he wants to do is throw back that President Trump's a racist and that this shouldn't be going on. So I'd like to hear from our team in the war room in Posobiec exactly what your thoughts are. I think it's a historic day, and I think Pompeo is really going to deliver on a stem winder speech out there as a fire breather that Mike Pompeo is.
Governor.
Yeah, look, I'm looking forward to hearing what Pompeo says today. And, Steve's exactly right. What you're seeing now is a coalition emerging. So we need a whole of U.S. government approach. So that's DOD, FBI, Treasury. But it also means that we do have to build this alliance for liberty. It means that we have to get the Brits involved. It means we have to get India involved. We need to get Japan involved. We need to get the Philippines involved. We need to reach out to Vietnam, right? There are a lot of folks who are concerned about China and the Chinese Communist Party, and the United States can, as it always has, help to lead this effort for the free world.
Posobiec, we've got about 90 seconds. Over to you.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I also piggyback off of what Steve said, point out that Joe Biden's response always seems to be, oh, Trump is racist. When Trump shut down flights from China very early on in this, back in late January, when many of us were in pandemic, were calling him to do so, Joe Biden turned around and said it was xenophobic. It turned out to be one of the best calls that was made in the entire lead up to this pandemic. So if that's all his response is going to be, how does he intend to be a leader if that's all he's got?
Mr. Maxey?
Well, I think that he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. He's standing up for the American people. He's defining what is going to happen going forward. I think that it's incredible to have
Jack, just tell us in the 30 seconds we've got left, when we left it off in the last segment and we had Biden calling the president racist, the first racist president, what did you say in the break?
Oh, well, it's pretty funny. The governor and I both said, shall we give a 5-minute primer on Wilson, President Wilson? There's a reason Princeton's taking the name off of the thing. He was the first one to reintroduce segregation to federal employment. In fact, he was so concerned about it, he made a requirement that you attach a photograph so that no people of African American heritage could sneak into the federal bureaucracy. He also, for the parents out there and the teachers union, if you're listening, he wanted to play Birth of a Nation in every single school in America.
There you go. All right, War and Pandemic returns in just a moment. Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Posobiec, Governor Eric Greitens, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, all here for you this morning. Hashtag War Room Pandemic to have your say. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.